our response to circumstances around us is very much our responsibility. There can be a storm soaring and you can be in fear and in the corner and shaking, crying, weeping, or you can go out and you can speak to the storm and say, peace be still. Hey, I'm Megann Marcellino, and I want to welcome you back to Generations at the Table. First of all, this is my last podcast with you for 2024, and I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to invest in your spiritual growth, for aligning your habits and your patterns with the rhythm of God and doing that with me. I hope you know how much it blesses me and encourages me to know that we are on this journey together, and I am incredibly honored that you would allow me to be a voice in your life. You know, there are so many voices out there, and there is so much speaking into us, trying to shape us, trying to form us. And the fact that you would take the time to allow me to be a part of your spiritual growth and your development is truly such an honor, and I'm so humbled by it. For those of you who have written in and encouraged me, for those of you who have grabbed me at services and feasts and said something, I just want you to know how much that means to me. Personally, thank you. Just thank you so much for saying something, and thank you so much for being a part of this journey. It has been really a unique experience where I have learned so much, not only about myself, but about the Lord. And so thank you for being a part of that. Today, I want to talk to you about something that the Lord has been talking to me about, which is identifying what I want in the year ahead. And so I'm going to jump right in and say, I hope you're going through your Goals to Grow exercise with us. There'll be a link in the show notes, but you can also find it at curtlandry.com/year ahead. And Goals to Grow is not just for January or not just for Rosh Hashanah. It's an exercise about choosing to align our habits and our patterns with what the Lord has for us so that we can walk in the fullness of our God-given destiny. We can walk in our purpose. We can walk in our identity. We can leave a legacy. We can leave an inheritance to our children's children. That is what this is about. This is about living in intentionality and in purpose and becoming who God has called us to be. Not just what we want, but Lord, what are you saying about my life? What have you spoken over me, and how can I walk that out? And so part of this conversation I want to have today, though, is about the power of clarification. The power of vision. You know, in Habakkuk 2, it says, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, like we're stating it. But I think the power in that comes is when we know what we're moving towards. And I believe I've mentioned this before, but we started a program with the kids this year for their education. And what they encouraged us was to find 4 areas for each child that would say, this is how I want my child to grow spiritually. This is an area I want my child to grow in physically. This is an area I want my child to grow in when relationships, and this is an area I want to see academic growth. And so there were these 4 areas, and it said, you know, very simple, 1 point each, not this long paragraph. This is what I want to see. This is what I want the fruit of my years of labor to be. So for Arabella, it's like, this is for 3rd grade. And for Joseph, it's basically like pre-K. And so it's, you know, totally different, but how do I see them as individuals? And then how do I make sure that the curriculum that we're using, that the books that we're reading, that the extras and the things that we're doing are pushing towards that goal? But what I loved about it was that fully encompassed them as a person, their spiritual life, their physical health, their relationships, and then something for them to learn academically. So if we take that same principle today, what we're looking for is to know our destination. As Shannon said to us earlier in the year, where do we want to land our plane in these areas? So as you go through the Goals to Grow exercise, I would encourage you to do the same. You know, you're going to see different goals, spiritual goals and joy goals and things like that. But if you look at it from that 4 approach of what do you want spiritually, physically, relationships, and instead of academics, since most of us probably aren't in school anymore, it is though something you want to learn. Something that you want for your mind. Maybe it's you want to be a better leader, so you have these books that you want to read and implement. Maybe it's an art skill that you want to cultivate. Maybe it's something like, you know, baking or learning a different language. Something, though, that keeps you growing and that you remember that you are a student. I think it's so important to stay in that place of learning. And so Proverbs 16:9 says, a man's heart plans his ways, but the Lord directs his steps. And it's interesting here. There's another scripture I want to talk about later, but it talks about our steps. And it's like our steps. And I started seeing that, and it's like, those are just like baby steps. Like so many times we want to make leaps. We want to fly over. We want to zoom through. We want to race. And it's like, no, the Lord directs our steps, which means it's one by one, day by day, sometimes really small. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope." So the Lord knows the thoughts that he thinks towards you, to give you a future and a hope. But what are your thoughts towards yourself? And have you embraced the thoughts that God has for you to embrace that hope and that future? Have you written the vision? Have you made it plain? Or are you just living like you're in the flow of the river? Whatever happens, happens. Whatever will be, will be. Are you living under the principle that basically, you were just kind of a victim of circumstances and you're in a response mode or a fight or flight mode instead of living intentionally, living with goals, making decisions, identity-based decisions? I'm a child of God, so I will do this and I won't do that. Because see, our response to circumstances around us is very much our responsibility. There can be a storm soaring and you can be in fear and in the corner and shaking, crying, weeping, or you can go out and you can speak to the storm and say, "Peace, be still." Those are two different responses. Well, whose choices are those? That's your choice. That's my choice. So how we approach these goals in this coming year is taking some accountability and responsibility for the fruit of our lives instead of just being a victim of whatever happens. So I think it's incredibly important that we have clear vision, because so many times I think the problem is we don't actually even really know where we want to go. And so we don't really define it. Maybe your vision has to do with health. And so it's like, I want to get healthy. Well, what does that mean? How is that defined? What is the fruit of that decision? And what is the consequence if you don't make that decision? I think those are kind of the ways you get there. And so if getting healthy means something to you, you need to write it down clearly. Like, I want to be, I want my muscle tone to be this. I want to cut sugar back by this much. So something that's measurable. Because if you just throw out these random goals, then it's very easy to misstep and not achieve them. And if you can identify the benefit, the reward of that decision, or the consequence of not making it, you'll have more motivation to move towards it. Maybe it's something in regards to your finances. It's like, well, I want to save more money. Okay, well, then what is the, an actual number you could save? What is realistic? What would be a stretch goal for that? Maybe it's you want to give more money. Okay, well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to be disciplined? I can tell you one of the disciplines that we made in our life with our tithing, and I know not everybody likes this because they like the idea of going up and giving in the basket, and I appreciate that. But at our stage of life, and with us being like kind of moving around a lot, not always present, we've got kids running out our ears. Like, tithing became an issue where one year I fell behind because we just weren't in the service long enough for me to go put it up, or we were trying to leave or get kids out the door. So I put our tithing on automatic giving. And I just said at the beginning of the month, when the paychecks come in, a check goes out and it's mailed to House of David automatically. I don't even want to see it. This is my tithe. This is my offering. And if the Lord asks us to give something extra, we do. But I remove the excuse that I was busy or gone or distracted because I wanted to live in obedience. So find ways that you can treat, your finances in that way to make it automatic for you so that you're not having to make those decisions. Maybe if you want to start saving more, I know for me, I have an account that's, disconnected from our checking account that every month a little bit of money gets pulled out of and it gets put into this other account automatically where I don't have to think about it. And it may not be a lot. Maybe it's only $200. Maybe it's $100, whatever it is, but it's going to go into this extra account and I'm going to, begin saving. So there's things like that, but you have to clearly define those visions. And I think when we struggle with feeling uncertain about our future, part of it's because we're uncertain about what we really want and what our actions are leading us towards. And we're just in this rat race of habit and pattern and schedule and up and down. And, we make dinner and we clean up and we put the kids to bed and we do it all again the next day. So, but what are we pushing towards? What are our goals taking us? So we have to take time to pause. We have to take time to wait on the Lord. We talked about that last week with Hanukkah, but we take this time and we wait until we hear direction, and we ask him for direction, and we seek his will for our life. Goals to Grow is not necessarily about what you want for your life, but what the Lord wants for your life. So it's very much a spiritual exercise. We begin by asking the Lord for clarity. We begin by asking the Lord for direction. How would you have me take steps towards this future? One of the things that I do is I usually ask the Lord for a word for the year, and it can be a single word. And I've had words like yield, and I've had words like shift, and different words, but it comes back and I look back and I say, oh, I see how this was like a thread woven throughout my experience of the year, but I see you moving through it. I see where I had to learn to yield. I see where I had to learn to shift. I see all these things. And so maybe it looks like that for you, but whatever it is, you keep these things in a place that you can review it and keep it in front of you. I think one of the biggest challenges we have when we make these goals at the end of the year is we maybe write them down, maybe we don't, but we don't look at them again. And the Goals to Grow exercise encourages us to revisit these, if not weekly, at least quarterly, so that you're going back and you're saying, oh, this is what I wanted. It's clearly defined. And this is why I wanted it. And if I don't get it, this is going to be the consequence of that. So we are attempting to align our path with God's will for our life because we want to advance the kingdom. We talked about last week about the power of holiness to be set apart. Well, part of holiness is an obedient lifestyle. So if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know where you're trying to land the plane or where God wants you to be, then you won't make decisions in alignment with that. It would be like trying to get, a map out and just being like, I'm not going anywhere. Like when you run a map, you follow the directions to get to your intended destination, right? And you may make a wrong turn and it's like, make a U-turn. Okay, correct. It's not unforgivable to have to make U-turns, but at least you're listening and you're responding to the direction. Psalms 37:23 says the steps, this is that scripture I was talking to you about, of a good man, or in our case, woman, are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. So the Lord delights in us taking steps towards him, which means it doesn't have to be a leap. It doesn't have to be a soaring moment. You don't have to be zooming. He delights in us step by step, day by day, one by one, moving towards his heart, moving towards our destiny, moving towards our purpose, our future, our identity, and our hope in him. And so I think it comes to basically learning to surrender our plans to God. And it's easy to create goals based on what we think we should do, but how do we create goals based on who he has called us to be? How do we create goals that are identity based on I am a daughter of the King? I have been called to do XYZ, so my goals are going to reflect that. And maybe it's, hey, I am called to be a mom. I am called to be a wife. And how are my goals going to further that in this season, I can do that in excellence, that I can serve my family in excellence. I can't tell you how important that role is. If you are serving children in any capacity, I have been reading so much in Matthew lately just about how the Lord called the little children to him and encouraged us to be like them. And in fact, that's one of the episodes that I'm getting ready to record for you in January is about that mindset. But there is a calling for us to raise up children and to raise up discipleships. And there is nothing about it that is not important. Whether it is a paid gig or not, whether it is your career or your identity, there is no title that I carry that is more important than mom to me. I love being a mom, and it is the hardest title, and it is so much work, and it is exhausting. But don't belittle yourself as you go in this new year, and define what you want for yourself in that role. Like, what do you want to be? What do you want to be remembered as? What do you want to instill in your children? What opportunities are you going to take? Like, don't belittle it just because you don't have some kind of career or you're not in some type of leadership. You as a mom is a leader of a family. You as a dad, you are a leader of a family, and you are cultivating hearts to know him. You are cultivating the seed of the kingdom that is and that is to come. And so I think that there's this fear of us needing to be able to control everything and in order to succeed. And the Lord wants us to be able to get rid of that mindset because that's exhausting and that leads to burnout. So we surrender our goals to him. And we surrender our identity to him. And we say, I want to become who you want me to become. And then we ask ourselves, what is most important? That is one of the questions that I've asked myself over the last few years. And it has stuck with me And I probably almost say it to myself daily. Okay, what is most important? When I'm setting my goals for the day, even at work, if I've got, 15 things on my to-do list, but what is most important, Megann? What really needs to happen today? And then I highlight those 2 or 3 things. And when I come home and I spend time with my family and I'm feeling distracted and my phone's going off and I'm getting texts and I'm getting Slacks and I've got all these things, sometimes I have to say to myself, okay, what is most important? Well, in that moment, what is most important is that I am cultivating the heart of my children, that I am nurturing my husband, that they feel that I am present, that they don't feel that I'm distracted, which means that my goals and my attention needs to be directed towards them. But it's seriously a question I have to ask myself daily and sometimes multiple times a day, because everything is important in that moment. But what is most important? And what do I stand to lose if I, respond? Well, if you're talking about a message to your team, maybe it could wait 30 minutes, but your children's heart can't. And maybe sometimes your children have to learn to wait and you have to respond to your team. That's something that my dad has encouraged me is that it's okay for our kids to see us working hard. And it's okay for our kids to see what it looks like to have responsibility. It's okay for them to see what it looks like for us to have to lead. Now, I believe fully in being present, but it's also okay for them to realize that the life that they live, that the privileges that they have, that the fact that they have food on their table is associated with a work ethic and being committed. But it's also okay for them to see that this is how committed we are to our kingdom call and that this is a family call that impacts us all. So your key areas of growth that I want you to identify as you go through the goals to grow is a place of spiritual growth, a place of physical growth, a mindset place, a place of learning, and a place of relational growth. And so for our spiritual growth, I really believe one of the biggest hindrances can be distraction. But name your hindrance. What is my hindrance for getting to where I want to be in a spiritual place? And realizing that the reward is the peace that comes from knowing that you are walking closely with God. James 4:8 reminds us, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. So what are your action steps to get there? Maybe it's a daily devotional time, daily time in worship. But I always encourage people to follow the atomic habits pattern when you're trying to set a new habit like this, where you're making it obvious, where you set a physical reminder, something like that. You make it easy, you make it obvious, you make it repeatable, those types of steps. But how are you going to identify that? Your physical growth. What is your biggest challenge for what you want physically? For me, usually it's time and dedication to something. Like, I don't want to take the time. So identify the challenge. What is the reward? Okay, my physical health is going to help me better serve God in the kingdom because I am going to be willing and able-bodied. When he calls, I'm going to be able to say yes. And so what's my action step? How can I prioritize my health? Those are some of the goals that you can set. Your learning and your growth, where it's our challenge. For me, a lot of times it is a feeling of inadequacy, or feeling like I'm going to look stupid or I'm going to look totally amateur hour at doing something. So that may make you hesitate to pursue learning, but God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He is allowing you to go through this exercise. And maybe he's asking you to learn something what you may think is silly, but trust him. Find out what that is, what that new skill set is. Maybe it's a skill set that's going to open up new relationships for you. Maybe he just wants your heart at a place of peace. Maybe he wants to give you something like painting or baking that you would learn to just like listen and rest. Maybe that's the season. Or maybe he's going to give you, hey, learn a skill set like golf because you're going to, be networking and advancing the kingdom through relationship. I know those are all silly things, but the point is don't underestimate God's ability to use a new skill set if he asks you to learn it. And then relational growth. What can be the biggest challenge there? I think past hurt, toxic relationships, or just that feeling of isolation. So how can you better develop community? And what are some relationships that you can nurture? Maybe those are in your family. Maybe those are in your workplace. Maybe it's totally new. But the reward is that healthy relationships reflect God's love and they further us in our kingdom purpose. And what is the challenge is that toxic relationships pull us back. So going into the year ahead, how can you better nurture those relationships that are moving in the direction that you want to go? And how can you get yourself free from time spent and invested in toxic relationships that aren't taking you anywhere? So this is part of the key to unlocking your kingdom destiny, is getting clear and writing the vision down. And that's what we're going to do towards the end of the year. That's what we're going to do through the Goals to Grow exercise. Again, the link is in the show notes, or it's curtlandry.com/year ahead. But when you are clear on your vision, and then you are clear on your identity, you are clear on your why, that is what's going to help you set those goals, because you need to know who you are, what the Lord has called you to, so that these goals are not just like these ambiguous things, but they are actually in alignment with your prophetic destiny. They are in alignment with your kingdom call. So the first thing is knowing who you are. And then the second thing is setting those goals that align with who you want to be. Not just who you are, but who you want to be in 2025. And then the third part of it is, how do you take steps? The steps of a good man are ordered of the Lord. How do you take those steps towards who you want to be, instead of just like waiting on it to happen, waiting on it to manifest? How do you become a disciplined follower? Again, thank you so much for joining me in 2024. It has been my ultimate pleasure and honor to speak into your life. I'm really looking forward to 2025 together and all the Lord has in store. I hope that you will get the download and make some comments and let me know what some of your goals are. I would love to cheer you on from the sidelines. I would love to hear kind of what the Lord is speaking to your heart. And I also think it's really interesting to see what the collective body is being spoken to about as we move into the year ahead. Thank you again. Happy New Year.